Hi, I'm doing a monologue on Charlottesville's racism and violence because I can't and haven't heard anybody speak clearly on this issue. And the first problem is that people don't define their terms, so they're misunderstanding what the other person says. So let's start with racism. If you have seen any of my interviews with Democratic congressmen like John Lewis or Clyburn or George Stephanopoulos, you'll see that when I talk about racism, the first thing I try to do is get me and the interviewee in agreement on a definition of racism. So the first thing I do is I build the definition from the bottom up with the facts that are integrated by the definition. So if you do that, I think you can lead somebody to the conclusion that racism is when you evaluate another person's character, their merits, or value based on their race instead of focusing on their actions. So it's a generalization made about a particular race. It's collectivism, it's identity politics, it's evaluating based on a certain collective group that you form a part of, but it's an epistemological mistake because everybody in a particular group does not share the same values or character or skills. So when you do that, you are necessarily just making a guess. Now, in some cases, very limited cases, you don't have time to find out the truth and you go by probability. So Jesse Jackson, for example, said he felt more comfortable when a white person was following him in a dark alley than a black person. Well, that's not racism. That's just, he's just going on the probability because he knows criminality goes on in a higher rate with black people, but that doesn't mean that he's saying that all black people are criminals. He's just using the probability in a particular limited circumstance. As long as he doesn't claim that he knows that person's character based on their race, that's not racism. So there was a lot of racism in Charlottesville, and the president made well, let's go into, of course, there's the white supremacists and neo-Nazis on the one side, and the Black Lives Matters and other groups on the left, and they're all racist. And the other problem with them is that they all believe in violence and initiating physical force, which is even a worse characteristic. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but the first thing we want to talk about is the racism. So if two people are talking about racism and they're using the term to mean two different things, they can't understand each other. And if you notice, I've interviewed a lot of black activists, Democrats in the Democrat Party, and they have a different view of what racism is. And a lot of people in America think that black people can't be racist, that only white people can be racist. That's nonsense. Racism is a mistaken conclusion about how to evaluate people. And it's just a mistake. It's an intellectual mistake. It doesn't mean that you have to hit the person because they're a racist. They're just mistaken. What you need to do is engage them in a conversation so that you can convince them that they have a mistake in their thinking. Now, violence is a totally different issue. And in that violence, there was violence on both sides. So violence is the initiation of physical force. And that means that you don't respect the other person's individual rights, and just because they have a difference of opinion, you want to hurt them and hit them and maim them or kill them. Well, that's a really egregious conclusion and needs to be punished, and they need to be in jail because those people are dangerous. And it doesn't matter what their color is or what their rationale is, they have to be punished. And in Trump's initial statement, I think he covered all of that quite well. He said that he was against the racism and violence of the groups on many sides, and that was exactly right. Then he got a lot of blowback from the mainstream media about how he didn't name the neo-Nazis. Now, why does he have to single those people out? Well, if he has to single people out, then he has to single all the groups. But he didn't do that because he caved to the pressure. But his initial reaction was perfectly fine. But it was like the biggest sin in the world not to mention these neo-Nazi or white supremacist groups by name. And that was like a dog whistle, according to Cokie Roberts. Now, I've seen a lot of reviews on this subject, or interviews and comments, and nobody defines the terms, either racism or violence, which is the initiation of physical force. That's a thug. That's a criminal person, a person who doesn't respect other people's rights and will use violence against them. So this is a problem that we have in America because of poor reasoning and poor thinking. So then Trump had to make a new statement where he said, okay, I'm going to name these people. And he did. And still, it was still a big problem because he didn't do it immediately. Anyway, I think if you look at if you've seen some of the coverage, I think you'll agree with me that people don't take the time to define what they mean by racism, define what they mean by violence, and then judge the individuals involved based on their individual actions. So the people that are racist are the people that have that mistaken conclusion in their mind. The people that are violent or aggressors or thugs or criminals, they're the ones that will hit you because they disagree with your view, or to steal your wallet, or whatever other motivation. So until we clarify that, I think people can't think straight about this. The person that I saw closest to this, at least referring to the definition, was Tucker. So he said that there's a Democratic primary, and there's a white candidate and a black candidate. And when the white candidate went to speak in a, I guess called the left convention or group, she wasn't allowed to speak because she wasn't the right color. And he said that was classical racism definition. But he didn't define it. You have to think in terms of principles and definitions, or else it's not really clear what you mean. You can give an example like Tucker did, that's fine. But it should be accompanied by an abstract statement like the one I just gave. What you mean. So that is my analysis on Charlottesville, racism and violence. Please let me know what you think.